Welcome to this explainer. Okay, if you're a student looking for a basic overview of how reality actually operates at the most fundamental level, well, get ready for a total paradigm shift. Today, we're diving into Lagos field theory. This framework proposes something absolutely mind-bending. It says the universe isn't some physical expanse of stretching spacetime. Nope. Instead, it treats the universe exactly like a giant computer processing data. Seriously, by the end of this, you're going to see your everyday world through an entirely new computational lens. So, traditionally, we're all taught to think of time as a flowing river, right? Like a continuous physical dimension we just travel through. But this theory's view of time? Totally different. In this framework, time isn't a physical dimension at all. Actually, it's a macroscopic rendering artifact. Think of it more like processing lag or a step-by-step frame rendering. It is, quite literally, a cosmic computer's refresh rate. To really understand this computational universe, let's boot up our system menu. We'll be looking at 1. The illusion of time, 2. The universal refresh rate, 3. Why time moves forward, 4. Gravity as computer lag, and finally, 5. The 0 FPS crash. All right, moving right into section 1, the illusion of time, or the static hard drive of the universe. Lagos field theory dictates that the universe, at its absolute core, is just raw arithmetic code. There's no natural clock ticking away down there. Instead, all this code is saved on a giant static hard drive known mathematically as the Adelic ring. You can kind of think of it like an infinite cosmic USB stick. What this means is that past, present, and future don't actually happen in a sequence. They already exist, right now, simultaneously as a timeless safe state of pure data. Now, you might be wondering, if everything already exists at once, why do we experience time at all? Well, it all comes down to data throttling. Your localized consciousness simply cannot process the entire infinite Adelic ring all at once. If it tried, you'd suffer an immediate information overload and, well, crash. So, time acts as a sensory filter, literally a serial distribution filter. It slices this overwhelming multidimensional data into bite-sized sequential packets just so your brain can handle it. It's exactly like trying to stream a 4K movie on terrible Wi-Fi. Time is basically a protective firewall so your consciousness doesn't just buffer to death. Let's jump to section 2, the universal refresh rate, which is basically your reality's clock speed. Because reality isn't this continuous, unbroken flow like we thought. It's actually rendered frame by frame via a hardware clock. And get this, that clock is ticking at roughly 23.67 million times a second. Exactly 23.6742 megahertz to be precise. Space-time is essentially just a fluid projection flickering into existence over 23 million times every single second. Crazy, right? Okay, so here's how that static file actually turns into a moving reality through stroboscopic frame rendering. First, there's relational partitioning, where the system splits into you, the observer, and the unrendered field. Second is the critical line filter. Your observer status basically sweeps vertically up a mathematical path called the Riemann zeta line. Third, for every tick of that 23 megahertz clock, a Markov transition matrix steps in. It acts exactly like a GPU fetching p-adic data to render the frame. And finally, non-associativity, where 8-dimensional mass creates a definitive directionality. It's essentially a real-time temporal compiler running the universe. Which brings us to section 3, why time moves forward, or as I like to call it, the unrewindable code. So if the universe is just data, why can't we just hit rewind? The answer lies in something called octonionic non-associativity. Because the foundational physics are based on 8-dimensional numbers, the actual order of mathematical operations completely changes the outcome. Basically, A times B times C does not equal A times B times C if you group them differently. You literally cannot compute backward because the algebraic path is structurally altered with every single step the universal engine takes. The math outcome permanently changes, kind of like how you can't unbake a cake once it's out of the oven. This even upgrades how we look at fluid dynamics. This theory treats the vacuum of space itself as an informational fluid. As data flows, that complex math causes computational snags in the underlying arithmetic grid. And because of this, the vacuum lattice physically remembers its directional path. When the fluid hits these complex snags, it gets bus lag, which bleeds momentum away from the rendering process and vents that data safely right back into the static hard drive of the Adelic ring. Moving on to section 4, gravity as computer lag, literally dropping frames in the universe. Think about your laptop freezing up when you open like 30 browser tabs while trying to finish an assignment at midnight. Well, gravity is essentially the exact same thing. It is not a physical force pulling on matter. It's an operating system buffer trying to handle hyperdense information. If you look at normal space, data density is low. The serial bus flows smoothly at 60 plus FPS, and time ticks at standard speed. But when you introduce high gravity or high velocity, you get hyperdense data. The universal serial bus lags, it drops frames, and that physically manifests as dilated time. But honestly, the craziest part of all this, you cannot detect your own lag. If you are standing in a massive gravitational well, you won't feel slow at all. Your consciousness is a localized transceiver running on that exact same lagging processor bus. Therefore, your internal biological clock and your thought processing speed are lagging at the exact same rate as the surrounding universe. To you, time feels completely normal, even though you are in cosmic slow motion compared to someone in normal space. Finally, let's look at Section 5, the 0 FPS crash, the ultimate hardware ceiling. This whole lag concept is formalized by the Logos flow equation. The main thing to grasp for this overview is that it mathematically dictates that the local flow of time decays exponentially as the informational viscosity of the field rises, which is just a highly technical way of saying an area of space gets too thick and dense with data. This equation basically proves that gravity acts as an exponential throttling algorithm, stepping in so the universal serial bus doesn't just melt down when local information density gets too high. So, what actually happens when that localized data saturation hits absolute infinity? Well, you get a black hole. At a black hole's event horizon, the localized data completely overflows the system's buffer. The equation hits a complete exponential drop, right to the ultimate hardware ceiling. At this exact threshold, the local refresh rate drops to exactly 0 FPS. Time execution completely stalls out. It is literally the ultimate system crash for physics. We've seen today how time is really just a processing lag, a protective data throttle as your mind reads a timeless script from an infinite hard drive. But if you take a step back and view our reality simply as a 23 megahertz stroboscopic render, it leaves us with one final, fascinating question to ponder long after this explainer ends. If your entire reality, everything you know and experience, is just a frame-by-frame rendering, what happens when the universe decides to unplug the computer?